The summer heat hung thick over Riverside that Tuesday afternoon, the kind of heat that makes tempers short and patience thin. Officer Derek Paulson pulled his patrol car into the parking lot of Murphy's Corner Store, the same place he'd been stopping for his afternoon coffee for the past 12 years. 12 years on the force, 12 years of the same routes, the same faces, the same routine. Derek was tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the bone-deep exhaustion that comes from feeling like the world is changing too fast around you. At 42 years old, he'd started noticing things that bothered him. New policies at the department, sensitivity training sessions that felt like a waste of time, young officers fresh out of the academy talking about community engagement like it was some kind of revolutionary idea. He pushed through the glass door of Murphy's, nodding at old Frank behind the counter. The bell above the door chimed the same way it had for years. Some things at least stayed the same. "Usual, Derek?" Frank called out, already reaching for a large cup. "You know it," Derek replied, moving toward the coffee station at the back of the store. That's when he noticed the man browsing near the refrigerated section. Expensive charcoal suit, perfectly tailored. Leather shoes that probably cost more than Derek's monthly mortgage payment. The man was examining a bottle of orange juice like he was deciding on fine wine, his posture relaxed and confident. Something about the sight irritated Derek in a way he couldn't quite name. Or maybe he could name it, but didn't want to admit it to himself. Here was this guy dressed like he owned the world. In Derek's neighborhood, in Derek's store. Derek felt his jaw tighten as he poured his coffee, stealing glances at the man. The stranger picked up 2 bottles of juice and a protein bar, then walked to the counter with an easy stride. He exchanged pleasantries with Frank, his voice smooth and educated. Derek watched as the man paid with a platinum credit card, thanked Frank warmly, and headed toward the exit. Derek grabbed his coffee and followed a few steps behind, fishing for his wallet at the counter. By the time he made it outside, the man was walking across the parking lot toward a sleek black sedan parked in the shade. The words came out before Derek could stop them. Low muttered, but intentionally loud enough to be heard. The man stopped mid-stride. For a moment, he stood completely still, his back to Derek. Then, slowly, he turned around. His face was calm, but his eyes showed something else. Not anger exactly, something closer to disappointment, like he'd seen this movie before and was tired of watching it play out. "Excuse me?" the man said quietly. "Did you say something, officer?" Derek felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with something darker. Who did this guy think he was, challenging him? The badge on Derek's chest suddenly felt like armor, like permission. "I asked if you have a problem," the man continued, taking a few steps closer. His voice remained level, professional even. "Because I'm standing in a public parking lot minding my own business and you seem to have something to say." Other shoppers were starting to notice. An elderly woman loading groceries into her car looked over nervously. A teenage kid on his bike had stopped at the edge of the lot, phone already in hand. Derek should have walked away. Every bit of his training, every policy manual, every lecture from his old sergeant told him to disengage, to be professional, to represent the badge with dignity. But something in him refused to back down. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was fear of looking weak. Maybe it was something uglier that he'd been carrying around for years looking for a place to land. "Just keep moving," Derek said, his voice harder now. "We don't need your type causing trouble around here." The man's expression shifted slightly. His eyes narrowed and Derek could see him making a decision. The man reached into his jacket pocket and for a split second, Derek's hand moved toward his service weapon. But the man only pulled out his phone, raising it deliberately to capture Derek's badge number. "Your type?" the man repeated, his voice still maddeningly calm. "And what type is that, Officer Paulson?" He read the name from Derek's nameplate. "Please educate me." The parking lot felt like it had gone silent even though Derek could hear traffic on the main road, could hear the buzz of the store's electric sign. Everything else faded into the background. It was just him and this man standing 15 feet apart, the afternoon sun beating down on both of them. Derek took a step forward. The rational part of his brain was screaming at him to stop, but something else had taken over. His face flushed hot, and before he fully realized what he was doing, he spit on the ground between them, the gesture landing with disgusting finality near the man's expensive shoes. "I said keep walking," Derek said through clenched teeth. The man stood frozen. His phone was still up, still recording. His finger moved across the screen. clearly capturing every detail. Derek could see the man's jaw working, muscles tensing. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then the man lowered his phone slowly and put it back in his pocket. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost sad. "You have no idea what you just did," he said simply. "No idea at all." With that, he turned and walked to his car with the same dignified stride, unlocked it, and got inside. Derek watched him pull out of the parking lot, joining the afternoon traffic and disappearing around the corner. Derek, man, what the hell was that? Derek turned to see Officer Tony Chen, his sometime partner, standing near the store entrance with his own coffee. Tony had witnessed the whole thing, his face a mixture of shock and concern. "Nothing," Derek said, trying to sound casual, but his heart was pounding. "Just some guy with an attitude." "That didn't look like nothing," Tony said carefully. "That looked like something that could come back on you. On all of us. He'll forget about it by tomorrow," Derek said, waving his hand dismissively. But even as he said it, he felt a knot forming in his stomach. Probably just some salesman passing through town. "Who cares?" Tony didn't look convinced. "I hope you're right. Because these days, everything ends up on social media. Everything becomes a thing." Derek climbed into his patrol car, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling settling over him. He told himself he'd been right to stand his ground, right to not let some outsider disrespect him in his own neighborhood. He told himself the badge meant something, that people needed to show respect for law enforcement. But as he pulled out of the parking lot and returned to his patrol route, he couldn't quite silence the small voice in the back of his mind asking him why. Why had he said those things? Why had he let his anger take control? Why had a well-dressed stranger minding his own business bothered him so much? Derek pushed the thoughts away and focused on the road ahead. In a few days, this whole thing would be forgotten. That's what he told himself as the afternoon sun climbed higher, as the heat shimmered off the pavement. As the ordinary Tuesday continued its march toward an extraordinary reckoning that Derek couldn't yet imagine, he had no idea that the man in the expensive suit wasn't passing through at all. He had no idea that in less than a week he would see that face again, and he had absolutely no idea that when he did, that man would be wearing a police chief's uniform and holding Derek's entire future in his hands. The following Monday morning arrived with the kind of nervous energy that fills a workplace when big changes are coming. Officers gathered in small groups around the station, coffee cups in hand, voices low but animated. Today was the day they'd finally meet their new chief. Derek walked through the station doors trying to project his usual confidence, but the past week had been strange. He'd replayed that parking lot encounter more times than he wanted to admit. Late at night, lying in bed while his wife slept beside him, he'd see that man's face, that calm expression, those words, "You have no idea what you just did." But each morning, Derek pushed those thoughts away. Nothing had come of it. No complaint filed, no call from internal affairs. Just another forgotten moment in a city full of forgotten moments. He'd been right. The guy was nobody important. "Big day," Tony said, falling into step beside Derek as they walked toward the briefing room. 6 months they've been searching for Morrison's replacement. Must be someone special. Or someone who'll make our lives harder with more paperwork and policies, Derek muttered, grabbing a seat toward the back of the room. The briefing room filled quickly. Nearly every officer in the department had shown up, even those who weren't on duty. Change was coming, and everyone wanted to see what it looked like. Derek noticed Lieutenant Hayes standing at the front, shuffling papers nervously. Hayes was old school, a 25-year veteran who ran things by the book but didn't have much patience for what he called modern sensitivities. At exactly 8 o'clock, Captain Rodriguez entered through the side door and moved to the podium. The room quieted down immediately. Rodriguez was respected by everyone, a straight shooter who'd worked her way up through the ranks and had a reputation for fairness that crossed all lines. "Good morning, everyone," Rodriguez began, her voice carrying easily through the crowded room. "I know you've all been waiting for this day. Chief Morrison left big shoes to fill, and I won't lie to you. The search committee had their work cut out for them." Derek half listened, his mind drifting to the weekend football game he'd watched, the argument he'd had with his teenage son about curfew, the leak in his garage that needed fixing. Real life, important things. "We interviewed 12 candidates," Rodriguez continued, "all impressive, all qualified. But one stood out from the beginning. His record speaks for itself. Military service, decorated in 2 overseas deployments, master's degree in criminal justice and public administration, 15 years in law enforcement across 3 different cities. Derek felt someone behind him whisper, "Sounds like a politician." Rodriguez pressed on, her voice taking on more energy. But what really impressed the committee wasn't just the credentials. It was the results. In his last position, he reduced civilian complaints by 40% in 2 years, increased department diversity, improved response times, built partnerships with community leaders that actually meant something. Derek shifted in his seat, uncomfortable. Words like diversity and community partnerships always made him feel like he was being lectured, like everything he'd done for 12 years was somehow wrong. "Our department has been struggling," Rodriguez said, her tone becoming more serious. "We all know it. The incidents last year, the protests, the damaged relationships with neighborhoods we're supposed to serve. We need someone who can bridge those gaps, someone who understands both the difficulties of police work and the legitimate concerns of the communities we protect." The room had gone completely silent now. Even the usual whispers and shuffling had stopped. Everyone was focused on Rodriguez, waiting. "So without further delay," Rodriguez said, moving away from the podium, "I want to introduce you to our new police chief." The side door opened again. Derek's heart stopped. Walking through that door, wearing the formal dark uniform of a Riverside police chief, insignia gleaming on his shoulders, was the man from the parking lot. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by crisp police blues, but the face was unmistakable. Those same calm eyes, that same confident stride. Derek felt the blood drain from his face. His hands gripped the edge of his chair so hard his knuckles went white. This couldn't be happening. It wasn't possible. "Everyone, meet Chief Vincent Webb," Rodriguez announced. The room erupted in applause. Officers stood, some whistling, others clapping enthusiastically. Derek stood too, mechanically, his body moving on autopilot while his mind raced through 1,000 panicked thoughts. Chief Webb moved to the podium with that same easy confidence Derek remembered. He shook Rodriguez's hand, nodded to Lieutenant Hayes, then turned to face the assembled officers. His eyes swept across the crowd systematically, row by row. When they reached the back of the room, they landed directly on Derek. For a fraction of a second, no more than a heartbeat, their eyes locked. Derek saw recognition there. Clear, undeniable recognition. But Chief Webb's expression didn't change. No anger, no satisfaction, just acknowledgement, and then his gaze moved on to the next person and the next. "Thank you, Captain Rodriguez," Chief Webb began, his voice filling the room with natural authority. "And thank you all for that welcome. I know transitions are difficult. I know many of you are wondering what changes I'll bring, whether I understand the realities of your daily work, whether I'll support you when things get tough." Derek's mind was spinning too fast to focus on the words. His fellow officers were nodding, listening intently, but all Derek could think about was that parking lot, that moment of rage, the disgusting thing he'd done. Oh God, what had he done? "I want to be clear about something from the start," Chief Webb continued. "I believe in accountability. That means accountability for the communities we serve, yes, but it also means accountability for ourselves, for each other. We hold ourselves to a higher standard because we have to, because people trust us with authority over their lives and their freedom." Tony glanced sideways at Derek and whispered, "You okay, man? You look like you're going to be sick." Derek managed a tiny nod, but he couldn't speak. His throat had gone completely dry. Chief Webb was talking about his vision now, about building trust, about fair enforcement, about supporting good officers while weeding out those who betrayed the badge. Every word felt like it was aimed directly at Derek, even though the chief hadn't looked his way again. "I know some of you are skeptical," Chief Webb said, his tone becoming more personal. "I know some of you think I'm here to make your jobs harder, to second-guess every decision, to pander to critics. That's not who I am. I've walked in your shoes. I've made difficult calls in dangerous situations. I understand the split-second decisions this job requires." The room was completely absorbed. Derek could see officers nodding, their initial wariness starting to ease. Chief Webb had a gift for reading a room, for finding the right words. "But I also understand something else," the chief continued, his voice taking on an edge. "I understand what it feels like to be judged unfairly, to be treated as less than human because of how you look, to have your dignity stripped away by someone who has power over you." The room shifted uncomfortably. This was getting personal. "I didn't grow up with advantages," Chief Webb said. "I grew up in neighborhoods where police were seen as occupiers, not protectors. where my friends and I learned to fear the badge instead of respect it. And you know what made me want to become a police officer anyway? One cop. One single officer who treated my mother with respect when her car broke down late at night in a bad area. Who waited with her for the tow truck. Who saw her as a person who needed help, not a problem to be dealt with. Derek felt something twist in his gut. Shame. Hot, burning shame. That's the standard I hold myself to, Chief Webb concluded. And it's the standard I'll hold this department to. We're here to serve and protect all people equally, without prejudice, without exception. He paused, letting the words sink in. I'll be meeting with each of you individually over the next few weeks. I want to know your concerns, your ideas, your experiences. This department belongs to all of us, and we'll improve it together. My door is always open. More applause, more enthusiastic this time. Officers were impressed. Derek could see it on their faces, could hear it in their conversations as the meeting broke up. The new chief had won them over in 15 minutes. Derek stood on shaking legs, trying to blend into the crowd filing out of the briefing room. He just needed to get out, to breathe, to figure out what to do. Officer Paulson. The voice cut through the noise like a blade. Derek froze. Slowly, he turned around. Chief Webb stood at the front of the now mostly empty room, his eyes locked on Derek. A word, please, the chief said quietly. In my office. 10 minutes. It wasn't a request. Those 10 minutes felt like 10 hours. Derek sat at his desk, staring blankly at his computer screen, his mind racing through every possible scenario. He'd be fired. Maybe arrested. The incident could be considered assault. His career was over. His pension gone. How would he tell his wife, his kids? Tony appeared at his desk, concern written across his face. Hey, what was that about? The new chief calling you out like that? I don't know. Derek lied, his voice barely steady. Probably just routine. New boss wanting to meet people. But Tony wasn't buying it. Derek, I've known you for 6 years. I've never seen you look like this. What's going on? Derek couldn't answer. He stood up, straightened his uniform, and walked toward the chief's office like a man heading to his own execution. Other officers watched him pass, curious but not yet suspicious. They had no idea what was about to unfold. The chief's office was on the second floor, a corner room with windows overlooking the parking lot. Derek had been in this office dozens of times under Chief Morrison. It had always felt comfortable, familiar. Now it felt like stepping into a courtroom. He knocked on the door frame. Chief Webb sat behind the desk, reading through a file, still wearing his formal uniform. He looked up and gestured to the chair across from him. Close the door, Officer Paulson. Have a seat. Derek did as instructed, his legs feeling weak as he lowered himself into the chair. The silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Chief Webb set down the file and leaned back, studying Derek with those calm, intelligent eyes. Do you know why you're here? The chief finally asked. Derek's mouth was so dry he could barely speak. I think so, sir. Tell me what you think. The parking lot. Last Tuesday. Murphy's corner store. The words came out barely above a whisper. Chief Webb nodded slowly. That's right. You remember it then? Good. I was curious if you'd try to pretend it didn't happen. Derek forced himself to meet the chief's eyes. I'm sorry, sir. I was completely out of line. There's no excuse for what I did. You're right, Chief Webb said, his tone matter of fact. There is no excuse. But I want to understand something. Help me understand what was going through your mind that day. The question caught Derek off guard. He'd expected anger, threats, immediate consequences. Instead, the chief seemed genuinely interested in an answer. I don't know, Derek said honestly. I was having a bad day. I was frustrated. I saw you and I don't know why I reacted that way. You don't know? Chief Webb's voice remained level, but there was an edge to it now. Or you don't want to say it out loud? Derek felt heat rise to his face. I had no right to treat you that way, to treat anyone that way. That's still not an answer to my question. Chief Webb stood and walked to the window, his back to Derek. I'm going to tell you something, Officer Paulson. That wasn't the first time something like that has happened to me, not even close. I've been pulled over for driving a nice car in the wrong neighborhood. I've been followed in stores. I've had people clutch their purses when I get on an elevator in a suit. He turned back to face Derek, and for the first time there was emotion in his voice. But you know what made last Tuesday different? You were wearing a badge. a symbol that's supposed to represent protection, justice, fairness. And you used your position of authority to degrade another human being for no reason other than how they looked. Derek felt tears burning behind his eyes, but he refused to let them fall. He didn't deserve the release of crying. I have a daughter, Chief Webb continued. She's 9 years old. Smart as a whip, wants to be a scientist, and I have to sit her down and teach her how to act around police officers, how to keep her hands visible, how to speak respectfully, even if she's being treated unfairly, how to stay alive, Officer Paulson, because people like you exist. The words hit Derek like physical blows. He'd thought about his own children, but he'd never considered what it would be like to raise kids who had to be afraid of the police. I could fire you right now, Chief Webb said, returning to his desk. The city attorney has reviewed the incident. What you did meets the legal definition of assault. I could have you arrested, prosecuted, made an example of, and part of me wants to do exactly that. Derek's hands trembled in his lap. I understand, sir. But here's the thing, the chief continued, opening a different file on his desk. I've spent the last week reviewing personnel records for this entire department. Do you know what I found? In your first 5 years on the force, you had an exemplary record. Commendations for community service. You volunteered to coach youth basketball. You were known for de-escalating situations instead of letting them explode. Derek looked up, surprised. So what happened? Chief Webb asked. What changed between the officer you were and the man in that parking lot? For the first time, Derek really thought about it. When had things shifted? Was it gradual or sudden? He remembered feeling passed over for promotions while younger officers advanced, feeling like the rules kept changing, feeling like everything he'd learned about policing was being questioned. I got bitter, Derek said quietly. I started feeling like the job didn't matter anymore, like nothing I did was good enough. I stopped seeing people and started seeing problems. Chief Webb nodded. That's honest. And that's the first step. But honesty alone doesn't fix what you did. It doesn't change the fact that you let your bitterness turn into hate. And you expressed that hate while representing this department. I know. Sir? So here's what's going to happen, Chief Webb said, his voice taking on a formal tone. You have 2 choices. Choice 1. I terminate you effective immediately and refer the incident to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. You'll lose your pension, your career, and possibly your freedom. Derek's heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. Choice 2. You accept a 30-day suspension without pay starting immediately. During that time, you'll participate in a comprehensive program addressing bias, prejudice, and community relations. You'll attend daily workshops. You'll volunteer at community centers. You'll meet with people whose lives have been affected by police misconduct. And you'll write a detailed reflection on what you learn and how you plan to change. Derek stared at the chief, hardly believing what he was hearing. If you complete the program to the satisfaction of the review board, you'll be allowed to return to duty, but you'll be on probation for a full year. 1 complaint, 1 incident, 1 sign that you haven't truly changed, and you're done. No second chances after this. And if I refuse? Derek asked, though he already knew the answer. Then you choose option 1 and we proceed accordingly. Derek's mind raced. 30 days without pay would hurt financially. His wife would have questions. His fellow officers would wonder what happened. But compared to losing everything, compared to the alternative consequences, it was a lifeline he didn't deserve. Why? Derek asked. Why are you giving me this chance? Chief Webb was quiet for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Because I believe people can change, he finally said. Because throwing you away doesn't fix the problem. It just moves it somewhere else. And because somewhere inside that bitter, angry man who spit at my feet, there's still the officer who used to care about his community. I'm betting that officer can be found again. He pulled out 2 documents and slid them across the desk. These are the formal terms. Read them carefully. You have until the end of the day to decide. Talk to your wife. Think about what kind of man you want to be. What kind of father? What kind of officer? Then let me know your choice. Derek took the documents with shaking hands. He stood on unsteady legs, sir, he said, his voice breaking slightly. Thank you. I don't deserve this, but thank you. You're right, Chief Webb said, meeting his eyes directly. You don't deserve it. So don't waste it, because if you come back from this suspension and nothing has changed, I'll know I made a mistake, and I don't make the same mistake twice. Derek walked out of that office feeling like he'd been taken apart and put back together differently. The hallway looked the same, but everything had changed. He had a choice to make, but deep down, he already knew what it would be. He just hoped he could become the man Chief Webb was betting he could be. Derek told his wife everything that night. They sat at the kitchen table after the kids went to bed, and he laid it all out. The parking lot incident, the humiliation of discovering who Chief Webb really was, the choice he'd been given. His wife listened without interrupting, her face moving through shock, disappointment, and finally something that looked like sadness. "I don't even know who you've become," she said quietly when he finished. "The man I married wouldn't have done something like that." Her words hurt more than anything Chief Webb had said. Because she was right. Somewhere along the way, he'd lost himself. Derek accepted the suspension the next morning. By afternoon, he'd received his schedule for the 30 days. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, split between workshops and community service. It looked more demanding than his regular job. The first week was torture. Derek showed up to a community center in the West Side neighborhood, a part of town he'd only ever seen from his patrol car. The building was old but well-maintained, with colorful murals painted on the outside walls and the sound of kids playing basketball in the gym. He was greeted by Mr. Patterson, a retired teacher who ran the center's youth programs. The man was in his 60s with gray hair and kind eyes that seemed to see right through Derek's defensive walls. "So you're the officer Chief Webb sent over," Mr. Patterson said, shaking Derek's hand firmly. "He told me a little about your situation. Not everything, but enough." Derek felt his face burn with shame. "I'm supposed to volunteer here for the next month." "That's right. But let me be clear about something." Mr. Patterson's voice remained kind but firm. "These kids don't need someone doing time. They need someone who genuinely wants to be here. If you can't do that, tell me now and we'll figure out something else." Derek almost walked out right then. His pride screamed at him to leave, to tell them all where they could stick their program. But he thought about his wife's face, about his kids, about the man he used to be. "I'll try," he said honestly. "I can't promise I'll be good at it, but I'll try." Mr. Patterson nodded. "That's all I'm asking. Come on, I'll introduce you around." The center was busier than Derek expected. Kids of all ages filled the various rooms, doing homework, playing games, participating in activities. Most of them were Black and Latino, kids from families that struggled to make ends meet. Kids who probably had every reason to distrust a police officer. "Everyone," Mr. Patterson called out in the main room. "This is Officer Derek. He's going to be helping out around here for a while." The reaction was immediate and uncomfortable. Some kids looked away. Others stared with undisguised suspicion. One teenager, maybe 16 years old, actually laughed. "Oh great, a cop," the kid muttered. "Just what we needed." Derek felt anger flash through him, but he swallowed it down. He had no right to be angry. These kids had their reasons for feeling the way they did. Those first few days, Derek mostly stayed in the background. He helped set up chairs for activities, cleaned up after lunch programs, repainted a storage room. He listened to the kids talk when they forgot he was there. Their conversations opened his eyes in ways he hadn't expected. He heard them talk about getting stopped by police for walking home from school, about watching their older brothers get handcuffed for matching a description, about being followed in stores, questioned in parks, treated like criminals before they'd done anything wrong. One afternoon, Derek was organizing sports equipment when a boy about 13 years old came looking for a basketball. The kid was small for his age, wearing a school uniform that had seen better days. "They're in the bin over there," Derek said, pointing. The boy grabbed a ball but hesitated at the door. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why do cops always think we're doing something wrong? Like I'm just trying to get home from school. But police follow me sometimes. My mom says it's because of how I look, but I don't get it. I'm just a kid." Derek didn't have a good answer. He'd done exactly that. Followed kids who looked suspicious, never thinking about how it felt from their side. "I don't know," Derek admitted. "But you're right. That's not okay. You shouldn't have to feel like that." The boy looked surprised that Derek agreed with him. He nodded and headed to the gym. That conversation stuck with Derek for days. The workshops were even harder than the community service. He sat in rooms with other officers who'd been sent for various infractions, alongside community members who'd been affected by police misconduct. They watched videos of incidents that had gone wrong. They listened to people share their experiences. They discussed implicit bias, structural racism, and the history of policing in America. Derek wanted to argue, to defend himself, to explain that it wasn't that simple. But then he'd remember that parking lot, remember the look on Chief Webb's face, and he'd force himself to just listen. One session was led by a woman named Mrs. Johnson. She was in her 70s, walked with a cane, and had a quiet dignity that commanded respect. She talked about growing up in the South during segregation, about being denied service at restaurants, about watching police turn fire hoses on peaceful protesters. "I don't tell you this to make you feel guilty," she said, looking around the room. "I tell you this so you understand that this isn't ancient history. I'm alive. My children are alive. We remember. And when a police officer treats someone badly because of their skin color, it's not just about that moment. It's about generations of that treatment." After the session, Derek approached her hesitantly. "Mrs. Johnson, can I ask you something?" "Of course, son. How do you not hate us? After everything you've been through, how do you sit in a room with police officers and try to teach us?" "I wouldn't blame you if you did hate us." Mrs. Johnson smiled, a sad but genuine smile. "Hate is exhausting, Officer Derek. I've seen too much hate in my life to carry it in my own heart. Besides, change has to start somewhere. If I give up on people like you, if I stop believing you can learn and grow, then nothing ever gets better." "But what if I can't change?" Derek asked quietly. "What if I'm too set in my ways?" "Can't or won't?" Mrs. Johnson asked gently. "Those are different things. Change is always possible if someone wants it badly enough. The question is, do you want it?" Derek thought about that constantly over the following weeks. Did he want to change? Really change, not just go through the motions to save his job? The turning point came in his 3rd week. He was helping supervise an after-school program when a commotion broke out in the gym. The same teenager who'd made the sarcastic comment on Derek's first day was in a heated argument with another kid. Voices were rising and other kids were starting to gather around. Derek's old instincts kicked in. He moved toward them, ready to take control, to establish authority. But something made him pause. He thought about what he'd learned, about how these kids saw police as threats rather than helpers. Instead of inserting himself into the situation, he caught Mr. Patterson's eye and let him handle it. The older man walked over calmly, spoke quietly to both boys, and within minutes had them sitting down talking through their problem. Later, Mr. Patterson pulled Derek aside. "I noticed you held back there." "Yeah," Derek said. "I figured they didn't need a cop making things worse." That showed wisdom. "But I want you to understand something. These kids don't hate police because they're police. They're afraid of police because of how they've been treated. If you show them respect, if you see them as people first, you'd be surprised how they respond." The next day, Derek tried something different. Instead of staying in the background, he joined a basketball game during free time. He wasn't great at basketball, and the kids definitely played better than him, but he tried. He joked around. He high-fived the younger kids when they made shots. He let them see him as a person instead of just a uniform. The 16-year-old who'd mocked him that first day was there. His name was Terrence, and he was good, really good. After the game, as everyone was catching their breath, Terrence approached Derek. "You're not terrible for an old guy," he said with a slight smile. Derek laughed. "Thanks, I think. Can I ask you something real?" Terrence's smile faded. "Are you actually learning anything here, or are you just putting in time until you can go back to not caring?" The question was direct and honest. Derek appreciated that. "I'm learning," Derek said. "More than I expected. More than I wanted to, if I'm being honest. This whole experience has been uncomfortable and humbling and necessary." Terrence nodded slowly. "My older brother got arrested 2 years ago. Cops roughed him up pretty bad for a broken taillight. He wasn't resisting or anything, he was just scared. Now he won't even drive anymore because he's terrified of getting pulled over again." "I'm sorry," Derek said, and he meant it. That shouldn't have happened to him. "Will you be different?" Terrence asked. "When you go back?" "I'm going to try," Derek said. "I can't promise I'll be perfect, but I'm going to try to be better." As Derek drove home that evening, he realized something had shifted inside him. The defensive walls he'd built up were starting to crack. He was beginning to see people instead of problems, individuals instead of stereotypes. He still had another week left, but for the first time since this whole nightmare began, Derek felt something unexpected. Hope. Not just hope that he'd keep his job, but hope that he could actually become the officer he should have been all along. 6 months had passed since the charges against Chris were dropped, and Linda was sitting in her courtroom on a Friday afternoon when her clerk told her there was someone waiting to see her. She finished up her last case of the day and walked back to her chambers, wondering who it could be. Chris was standing in her waiting area, wearing a dark blue uniform shirt with a patch on the sleeve. He looked different, healthier. He'd gained some weight, his face wasn't as drawn, and there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Hope, maybe? Chris, Linda said, surprised. Is everything okay? He broke into a huge grin. Everything's better than okay. I wanted to show you something. Do you have a few minutes? For you, always. Come on in. They walked into her office and Chris pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos. Remember that program you told me about? The one for job training? Of course. Look, he said, turning the phone to show her. It was a certificate. I finished the HVAC technician course. 12 weeks of intensive training. I learned how to install heating systems, repair air conditioners, work with commercial refrigeration units. All of it. Linda felt warmth spread through her chest. Chris, that's amazing. I'm so proud of you. There's more, he said, practically bouncing with excitement. I got hired. A company called Reliable Climate Control brought me on full-time. Benefits, retirement plan, everything. I'm making almost twice what I was making at the warehouse. That's wonderful. And I got my own apartment, Chris continued. Nothing fancy, but it's clean and safe, and it's mine. No more living in that efficiency with the broken heat and the leaky ceiling. I even have a spare bedroom where my sisters can visit. Linda felt tears prick her eyes. I'm so happy for you, Chris. You worked hard for this. I couldn't have done it without you, he said seriously. You didn't just save me from prison. You gave me a reason to believe I could be more than what I'd become. That's a gift I can never repay. You don't need to repay anything, Linda said. Just keep moving forward. That's all I want. Chris sat down in one of her office chairs. Actually, that's kind of why I'm here. I want to do something. Something to help other people who are in the situation I was in. What do you have in mind? I've been talking to some people at the community center in our old neighborhood, Chris explained. You know, where we used to play basketball after school? They're still around, still trying to help kids. And I thought, what if we started a mentorship program for young people who are at risk of dropping out or getting in trouble? People who could use someone to show them there's another path. Linda leaned forward, interested. Tell me more. Well, I was thinking I could share my story. Not to scare kids, but to show them that even if you make mistakes or life gets hard, you can still turn things around. And maybe we could connect them with resources, help them stay in school, introduce them to trade programs like the one I did, give them options. That's a beautiful idea, Linda said. I was hoping you might want to be involved too, Chris added. I mean, I know you're busy with being a judge and everything, but maybe you could come talk to the kids sometimes. Show them what's possible if they keep pushing forward. Linda didn't even have to think about it. I'm in, absolutely. Over the next few months, they got the program off the ground. They called it Second Chances, which Chris said was cheesy but honest. They started with just 10 kids, teenagers from the old neighborhood who were struggling in school or had gotten into minor trouble with the law. Chris met with them once a week, talking about his experiences, helping them with job applications, teaching them practical skills. Linda came in once a month to talk about education and the legal system, answering questions about how to navigate the world when you came from nothing. The local newspaper caught wind of what they were doing and ran a story. It included the full account of Chris's wrongful arrest and how Linda had fought to uncover the truth. The article went viral online. Suddenly, Chris and Linda were getting calls from other communities wanting to start similar programs. But that wasn't the only ripple effect from that day in Linda's courtroom. Pete Gallagher, the pawnshop owner, had been convicted of insurance fraud and filing false police reports. He'd lost his business and served 9 months in jail. The insurance company had recovered their money, but Gallagher's reputation was destroyed. Detective Webb had been promoted after his honesty about the flawed investigation. He'd been put in charge of a new unit focused on reviewing old cases where there might have been mistakes or misconduct. He'd already helped free 2 other people who'd been wrongly convicted. Councilman Rodriguez had lost his re-election bid after questions about his involvement in the case. A new councilwoman had been elected, someone who'd grown up in the same neighborhood as Linda and Chris and actually cared about the people there. And Patricia Delgado, the prosecutor, had started a program in her office to review evidence more carefully before filing charges. She'd hired additional staff and implemented new procedures to make sure what happened to Chris didn't happen to anyone else. One evening, Linda was at the community center, helping Chris set up for their weekly meeting with the kids when her phone rang. It was Kevin Chen, the young public defender who'd represented Chris. "Judge Morrison," he said, his voice excited. "I wanted to tell you something. I just won my first trial, a case that I would have pleaded out 6 months ago, but I actually investigated it properly this time. My client was innocent and the jury agreed." Linda smiled. "That's wonderful, Kevin. I'm proud of you." "I learned from watching you," Kevin said. "You taught me that it's worth fighting even when it's hard, even when it seems like nobody cares. So thank you." After she hung up, Chris looked at her questioningly. "Good news?" "Very good news," Linda said. "Just more evidence that doing the right thing matters even when it's difficult." The kids started arriving for the meeting. There was Tyler, a 16-year-old who'd been caught shoplifting but was now working part-time and pulling his grades up. There was Ashley, a 15-year-old whose mom was in rehab, and who was now living with her grandmother and talking about going to college. There was Ramon, a 17-year-old who'd been in a gang but had left and was now enrolled in an automotive repair program. All of them were works in progress, just like everyone else. But they were trying, and they had people in their corner now, people who believed in them. As Chris started the meeting, Linda looked around the room. This was the same community center where she and Chris had spent so many afternoons as kids, dreaming about better lives. The building was old and worn, the paint was peeling in places, and the basketball hoop outside still had a bent rim. But inside these walls, something important was happening. Young people were learning that their circumstances didn't have to define their futures. After the meeting ended and the kids left, Chris and Linda locked up the center together. They stood outside in the cool evening air, looking at the neighborhood around them. It hadn't changed much. The same apartment buildings, the same corner stores, the same streets they'd walked as children. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Chris asked quietly. "If you hadn't been the judge that day? If you just recused yourself like you were supposed to?" "I think about it all the time," Linda admitted. "I broke rules, Chris. I put my career at risk. I probably shouldn't have done what I did." "But you did do it," Chris said. "And look at everything that came from it. I got my life back. Those kids in there have mentors now. The police department is reviewing cases. That prosecutor is being more careful. Even that young lawyer is doing better work. All because you decided to fight for what was right instead of what was easy." Linda thought about that. She'd spent her entire career trying to be a good judge, trying to follow the rules and be fair. But sometimes, she'd learned, justice required more than just following the rules. Sometimes it required courage. Sometimes it required looking at the person standing in front of you and really seeing them, not just as a case number or a defendant, but as a human being with a story. "We did good, didn't we?" she said softly. "Yeah," Chris replied, smiling. "We really did. And you know what? I think that promise we made on those swings when we were kids, we finally kept it. Both of us, we got out. Maybe not in the way we expected, but we made it." Linda looked at the rusty swing set across the street, still standing after all these years. She thought about two kids sitting there decades ago, dreaming of a better future. They couldn't have imagined this, couldn't have known the paths their lives would take, couldn't have predicted that they'd find their way back to each other in the most unlikely way possible. But here they were. Different than they'd been, scarred by their journeys, but still standing. Still fighting. Still believing that tomorrow could be better than today. And that, Linda thought, was what second chances were really about. Not erasing the past or pretending bad things hadn't happened, but having the courage to keep moving forward anyway. To keep trying. To keep hoping. To keep showing up for the people who needed you. "Come on," she said to Chris. "Let's go get dinner. My treat." "You always say it's your treat," Chris laughed. "That's because I'm a judge and you're an HVAC tech who just started 6 months ago," Linda shot back, grinning. "Give it a few years and you can treat me."